The laughter echoed across the shooting range when Staff Sergeant Sarah Mitchell picked up the M24 sniper rifle. At 32 years old, with auburn hair pulled back in a regulation bun and calm green eyes that never wavered, she had heard variations of this mockery her entire military career. "Maybe try something lighter, ma'am," said Sergeant Cooper, a muscular recruit with a Texas drawl and a cocky smile. His buddies snickered behind him, watching the woman they assumed was just another support staff pretending to be a shooter. "That M24's got a kick that'll knock you on your ass." Sarah didn't respond immediately. Instead, she methodically inspected the weapon with practiced efficiency. Her fingers moved across the rifle's cold metal, checking the bolt action, verifying the scope mounting, running through the pre-firing checklist that had become second nature over years of training and combat deployments. The Fort Carson firing range stretched out before her, targets positioned at various distances across the Colorado landscape. 12 recruits stood in formation, all male, all in their early 20s, all carrying the confident swagger of soldiers who'd qualified with rifles and basic training and thought that made them snipers. "I'll make you a deal." Sarah finally said, her voice calm and measured. 3 shots, 300, 600, and 800 meters. Different targets, different conditions. "After I demonstrate, each of you will attempt the same shots." Cooper grinned, exchanging glances with his fellow recruits. "And when we outshoot you," Sarah allowed herself a slight smile, the kind that should have warned them they'd made a terrible miscalculation. "Then I'll recommend all of you for advanced sniper training immediately." She chambered around with a smooth practice motion. "But when I outshoot you, you run the obstacle course in full gear, twice." The sun hung high in the Colorado sky, casting harsh shadows across the firing range. The wind picked up slightly from the east, about 8 miles per hour. A challenge for novices, a variable to be calculated for professionals. As Sarah settled into position behind the rifle, her mind wasn't on the recruits or their laughter. It was 15 years in the past, watching her father handle a similar weapon for the first time. July 1991, the Mitchell family living room. 14-year-old Sarah sat cross-legged on the carpet, eyes fixed on the television. Operation Desert Storm footage played across the screen. Reporters described the American victory in Iraq, the liberation of Kuwait, the technological precision of modern warfare. And then for just a moment, a fleeting image of Special Operations Forces. Among them, a tall figure whose face remained carefully out of frame. The reporter never mentioned his name, referring only to elite Delta Force operators. But Sarah knew. That was her father, William Mitchell, known to his unit by the call sign Ghost 6. 3 months later, he returned home. Changed, a shrapnel wound in his left shoulder. Nightmares that woke him shouting in the dark. The 1,000-yard stare that sometimes took him away from family dinners and birthday celebrations. But there were good days too. Like the autumn morning when he took Sarah to the family's property in rural Colorado, carrying a case containing a Remington 700 bolt-action rifle. "Dad, are you sure Mom's okay with this?" Sarah asked, eyeing the weapon case nervously. William Mitchell smiled, the lines around his eyes crinkling. "Your mother knows you're growing up. Besides, learning to shoot isn't just about weapons. It's about discipline, focus, and respect." He opened the case, revealing the sleek rifle inside. With practiced hands, he assembled it, explaining each component, each function, each safety protocol. Sarah watched, absorbing every detail with the intensity that would later define her military career. "The most important thing to understand," William said, placing the rifle in her hands for the first time, "is that this weapon doesn't care who's pulling the trigger. It doesn't know if you're a man or woman, tall or short, strong or weak. It only responds to proper fundamentals." He positioned himself behind her, adjusting her stance, her grip, the placement of her cheek against the stock. "Breathing is everything," he continued. "Inhale, exhale partially, hold. That natural respiratory pause is your window. That's when you're most stable." Sarah squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked against her shoulder. The target 100 yards away remained untouched. "Again," William said, not disappointment in his voice, but patience. "Remember what I said about fundamentals." By sunset, Sarah had hit the target 3 times. Not center mass, not consistently, but enough to spark something inside her. A connection to the discipline, the focus, the strange mathematical poetry of sending a small piece of metal exactly where you intended over vast distances. "You've got a good eye," William told her on the drive home. "Better than mine when I started." She would remember those words years later when everything changed. The fundamentals became ritual over the next 7 years. Every weekend they could manage, William took Sarah shooting. As she grew more proficient, he introduced new challenges, different distances, variable wind conditions, moving targets, the physics of ballistics. He taught her about minute of angle adjustments, about the Coriolis effect on long-range shots, about the way humidity affects bullet drop. Knowledge acquired through decades of military service, through training programs, the public would never know existed, through combat experiences he could never fully describe. "Why are you teaching me all this?" Sarah asked once during her senior year of high school. "It's not like I'm joining the military." William was cleaning his rifle hands, moving with mechanical precision. "Knowledge is never wasted, Sarah. Maybe someday you'll need it, maybe you won't. But understanding how things work, truly work, beyond what most people see, that's valuable no matter what path you choose." What neither of them knew then was how dramatically that path would change. September 12, 2001, the day after the towers fell, William Mitchell, retired for nearly 5 years, received a phone call. Sarah, home from college for an impromptu family gathering in the wake of national tragedy, saw her father's expression harden as he listened to the voice on the other end. "I understand," he said finally. "Yes, I'll be ready." He hung up and met his family's questioning gaze. "They're activating certain retired personnel. Special consultants, they're calling it." Sarah's mother turned away, understanding immediately what most Americans wouldn't. This wasn't about patriotic gestures. This was about sending the country's most experienced operators back into the shadows. 2 years later, in the spring of 2003, 3 officers in dress uniforms arrived at the Mitchell home. Sarah, now 26, opened the door. She knew before they spoke. The formal expressions, the carefully neutral tones, the envelope containing her father's posthumous medal. "We regret to inform you that Master Sergeant William Mitchell died during a helicopter accident in Afghanistan. His service to his country was exemplary, and his sacrifice will not be forgotten." The official story, clean, simple, a tragic accident during a routine transport mission. But Sarah had grown up with a Delta Force operator. She'd learned to read between lines, to notice inconsistencies, to question official narratives. The way the officers avoided specific details. The absence of her father's personal effects. The classified nature of his final mission. At the funeral, she met some of her father's former colleagues. Men with watchful eyes and firm handshakes who spoke of William in careful, edited anecdotes. One of them, an older man with steel gray hair and weathered features, approached her after the service. "James Harrison," he said simply, "I served with your father in places I'm not supposed to talk about." Sarah studied him. "You don't believe it was a helicopter accident, do you?" Harrison's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Recognition. Respect. "Your father always said you were perceptive. Too smart for your own good sometimes." He handed her a business card with only a name and number. "If you ever need anything, Sarah, anything at all." She kept the card, and 3 months later, she enlisted in the United States Army. Basic training, advanced individual training, airborne school. Each step of the way, Sarah Mitchell pushed herself beyond what instructors expected, beyond what fellow trainees thought possible. She wasn't the strongest, wasn't the fastest, but she was relentless, methodical, and when it came to marksmanship qualifications, she was exceptional. Mitchell, her drill sergeant, said after watching her outshoot every male trainee in her company, "You ever consider sniper school? She had, but she also knew the reality. Women aren't allowed in direct combat roles, Sergeant." The drill sergeant spat on the ground. "Times are changing. Not fast enough, maybe, but they're changing. Besides, we've got observers and designated marksman positions that don't technically count as direct combat, even if that's bureaucratic bullshit." 3 weeks later, Sarah received orders to Fort Benning for advanced marksmanship training. Not the official sniper school, which remained closed to women, but a specialized program for select personnel. On her first day, she found herself face-to-face with Master Sergeant James Harrison, now wearing fatigues instead of a funeral suit. "I pulled some strings," he said by way of greeting. "Hope you don't mind." "Why?" Sarah asked. "Because your father was the best shooter I ever knew. Because this country needs skilled marksmen more than it needs to cling to outdated restrictions." and because William would haunt me from the grave if I didn't look out for his daughter. The training was brutal. Harrison pushed Sarah harder than any of the male candidates. Higher standards, longer hours, more demanding scenarios. When she succeeded, he simply nodded and increased the difficulty. When she failed, his criticism was direct and unsparing. You think the enemy cares if you are tired, if conditions aren't perfect, if the shot seems impossible. This isn't about being fair, Mitchell. It's about being lethal. Other instructors were less supportive. Captain Robert Reynolds, a traditionalist who made no secret of his belief that women had no place in combat roles, seemed to take personal offense at Sarah's presence. "This isn't a social experiment, Harrison," she overheard him saying one evening. "We're training soldiers for war, not playing gender politics." Harrison's response was calm but firm. "With all due respect, Captain, and I've been in more firefights than you've had hot dinners. Mitchell can shoot. That's what matters." Despite the obstacles, Sarah completed the program at the top of her class. Not that it earned her many friends. The military, especially its special operations community, remained skeptical of women in combat roles. But it did earn her a deployment to Afghanistan in early 2004, assigned as a designated marksman to a forward operating base in Kandahar province. And it gave her the opportunity to begin asking quiet questions about her father's final mission. The mountains of Afghanistan taught Sarah lessons no training program could simulate. The disorienting effect of altitude on ballistic calculations. The way extreme temperature variations between day and night affected rifle accuracy. The psychological weight of knowing each shot could mean life or death for fellow soldiers. Her first combat operation came 3 weeks into deployment. A routine patrol through a village suspected of Taliban activity. Nothing in the intelligence suggested significant resistance. A standard show of force mission. The ambush came at mid-morning, insurgents hidden in buildings on both sides of the narrow street. The patrol's point man went down immediately, shot through the shoulder. The unit commander took shrapnel from an improvised explosive device moments later. Sarah, positioned at the rear with her spotter, found herself suddenly the highest-ranking operational soldier. Through her scope, she counted at least 15 attackers. Too many for their 8-person patrol to handle in a frontal assault. "Miller," she called to her spotter, a skeptical corporal who'd made no secret of his doubts about serving with a female marksman. "We need elevation. That abandoned building to the north. Second floor should give us coverage of the entire street." Miller hesitated, clearly uncomfortable taking orders from her. "That's an order, Corporal, unless you've got a better idea how to keep our people alive." They reached the building under covering fire from the remaining patrol members. The second floor offered a clear view of the village center where their team was pinned down. Sarah set up her position near a broken window, calculating distance, wind speed, and bullet drop. Her first shot caught a Taliban fighter moving between buildings. Clean, center mass, instant kill. The second shot hit a machine gunner targeting the patrol's medic. Third shot, another insurgent. Each target acquired each shot precise, each threat neutralized with mechanical efficiency. Miller's attitude changed with each successful engagement. His initial reluctance transformed into grudging respect as he called out new targets, adjusted for changing wind conditions, and watched Sarah make shot after impossible shot. 8 confirmed kills in under 15 minutes. The remaining Taliban fighters retreated, unwilling to face the unseen sniper who seemed able to strike from anywhere. When the dust settled and reinforcements arrived, the patrol's wounded commander, Lieutenant Parker, requested a debriefing with Sarah. "Those were some of the most difficult shots I've seen anyone make under combat conditions," he said from his stretcher, voice strained through pain. "Where did you learn to shoot like that, Sergeant Mitchell?" Sarah thought of her father, of weekend lessons on rural Colorado hillsides, of Harrison's relentless training. "I had good teachers, sir." The incident report mentioned her role in neutralizing the ambush. Commendations followed. So did whispers. Some soldiers respected her skill. Others questioned whether a woman should be in such a role. A few spread rumors that her shots had been exaggerated, that male soldiers had actually made the confirmed kills. Sarah ignored the gossip. She had more important concerns. Each patrol, each mission, each conversation with local interpreters brought her incrementally closer to information about her father's final operation. Fragments, whispers, references to a classified mission codenamed Phantom. During her off hours, she compiled notes in a small, leather-bound journal. Locations, names, dates. Gradually, a picture began to emerge of a high-risk operation targeting not Taliban leadership, but something else. Something involving a Russian name that appeared in multiple accounts, Zakharov. 3 months into her deployment, Sarah received unexpected orders. Transferred to a classified forward operating location. No explanation, no warning, just a helicopter flight into remote mountain territory where a small compound housed specialized personnel from various military branches and intelligence agencies. James Harrison met her on the landing pad. "What is this place?" Sarah asked, taking in the unusual security measures and mix of military and civilian personnel. "Officially, it doesn't exist." Harrison led her toward a reinforced bunker. "Unofficially, it's where we handle operations too sensitive for conventional channels." Inside the bunker, a secure briefing room awaited. Maps covered the walls, surveillance photos, intelligence reports. Harrison gestured for Sarah to sit. "Your performance in Kandahar got noticed by people who matter," he said. "That and your family connection." Sarah tensed. "What does my father have to do with this?" Harrison studied her carefully. "You've been asking questions, collecting information about Operation Phantom. Did you really think that would go unnoticed?" "I have a right to know how my father died." "Yes, you do." Harrison pushed a folder across the table. "But the truth is complicated and dangerous. William wasn't on a routine transport mission. He was hunting a ghost from the Cold War, a former KGB bioweapons expert named Viktor Zakharov, who went off the grid after the Soviet collapse." Sarah opened the folder. Inside, operational details, surveillance photos, mission parameters. "This says Zakharov was working with the CIA after defecting in the 80s. He was, until he wasn't." Harrison's expression darkened. "Zakharov helped develop biological weapons for a classified program. When funding was cut after the Soviet collapse, he disappeared with research materials. Resurfaced in 2003 offering weaponized smallpox variants to terrorist organizations. And my father was sent to stop him." Harrison nodded. "William tracked Zakharov to a compound in northern Afghanistan. The mission was sanctioned at the highest levels. But something went wrong. The helicopter didn't crash Sarah. It was shot down after extracting your father's team. No survivors. Who knew about the mission? Who gave the orders? That's where things get complicated." Harrison closed the folder. "There are indications that Zakharov had help from inside our own government, people who wanted his research to continue under different management." Sarah processed this information, connecting it to her scattered notes, to overheard conversations, to the inconsistencies in the official story. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because you're needed for a specialized role, and because you deserve to know what you're really fighting for." Harrison stood. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we begin special training for high-altitude precision engagement, the kind of shooting most snipers only read about." Over the next 3 months, Sarah trained under Harrison's direct supervision. Extreme long-distance shooting, moving targets, adverse weather conditions. Each session pushed the boundaries of what was considered possible with a sniper rifle. "Most shooters think 1,000 meters is extreme range," Harrison told her during one session. "We're training you for 1,500, sometimes more." "Why me?" Sarah asked, making minute adjustments to her scope. "There must be dozens of more experienced snipers." "Experience isn't everything. You have instincts, natural talent, the same qualities your father had." Harrison paused. "And you have motivation that goes beyond duty. Sometimes that makes all the difference." By the time Sarah returned to regular deployment rotation, she had become something more than a designated marksman. Something closer to the shadows her father had operated within. Not officially a sniper, not in the records, but functionally, operationally, undeniably elite. Her second deployment sent her back to Afghanistan with new equipment, new parameters, and a growing reputation. The missions became more specialized. High-value targets, insurgent leadership, operations where a single precise shot from an unexpected distance changed battlefield equations. Between assignments, Sarah continued piecing together information about Operation Phantom and her father's death. Harrison provided what he could, but many details remained classified beyond even his access level. By the end of her second deployment, Sarah Mitchell had accumulated 47 confirmed kills across high-risk operations. Her shooting records at extreme distances became the stuff of whispered legend in special operations circles. Yet to most of the conventional military, she remained unknown. A ghost, just as her father had been. And like her father, she developed a call sign among those who knew her capabilities. Phantom's Daughter. Fort Carson Firing Range, 2005. Staff Sergeant Sarah Mitchell adjusted her position behind the M24 sniper rifle. The first target stood at 300 meters, a standard distance for infantry marksmen. She controlled her breathing, found the natural respiratory pause her father had taught her 15 years earlier, and squeezed the trigger. Perfect shot. Center mass. The recruits weren't particularly impressed. 300 meters was within their qualification parameters. They'd hit that too, given the chance. Lucky shot, Cooper muttered, though, with slightly less confidence than before. Sarah moved to the next position. The second target stood at 600 meters beyond standard infantry qualification into the realm of designated marksmen and snipers. Wind had picked up now about 10 miles per hour from the east, which would affect bullet trajectory significantly. She made a minor adjustment to her scope, accounting for wind drift and bullet drop at the increased distance. Another perfect shot. Center mass. Now the recruits were quieter. 600 meters with wind compensation wasn't luck. That was skill. The third position placed her before the most challenging shot. 800 meters, the extreme effective range of the M24, requiring expert-level understanding of ballistics, environmental factors, and rifle capabilities. Sarah took her time. She observed wind indicators downrange, calculated the necessary holdover for bullet drop, and adjusted her breathing to the natural respiratory pause where her body was most stable. She fired. Through the spotting scope, all 12 recruits could see what she already knew. Another perfect shot. Center mass at 800 meters under variable conditions. The range had gone completely silent. Cooper found his voice first. That's professional sniper-level shooting. Yes, Sarah replied simply. It is. Now who's first? Over the next hour, all 12 recruits attempted the same 3 shots. The best of them, Cooper ironically managed to hit the 300-meter target center and get close on the 600-meter shot, but missed the 800-meter target entirely. Most couldn't get consistent hits at 600 meters. As they finished looking dejected and facing the promised double obstacle course run, the range door opened. Colonel Marcus Blake walked in. The base commander, a no-nonsense officer with 25 years of service and a reputation for excellence. Behind him was a 3-star general that Sarah recognized immediately, General Robert Morrison, who commanded all sniper training programs for the U.S. Army. The recruits immediately snapped to attention. At ease, Colonel Blake said, then looked at Sarah. Sergeant Mitchell, I see you're running the new recruit evaluation. Yes, sir. Just finished the qualification shoot. General Morrison walked to the spotting scope, examining the targets. His eyebrows rose as he saw the 3 perfect hits at 300, 600, and 800 meters. Whose shots are these of mine, sir? Sarah replied. Morrison looked at the recruits, then back at Sarah, then at the targets again. A small smile crossed his face. Did you gentlemen know who you were shooting against today? The recruits looked confused. Cooper spoke up. Sir, we were just doing our qualification evaluation with the sergeant, sir. With Sergeant Mitchell, Morrison corrected. Did she introduce herself properly? Just said she was running our evaluation, sir. Morrison turned to Sarah. Sergeant Mitchell, these young men seem unaware of who you are. Would you mind if I provided some context? Sarah shrugged slightly. Your call, sir. Morrison addressed the recruits directly. Gentlemen, let me tell you about Staff Sergeant Sarah Mitchell. She holds every long-range shooting record on this base, some of which have stood for over 5 years. She has 47 confirmed kills across 2 combat deployments to Afghanistan. She's qualified as a Special Operations Support Marksman, which means she's trained alongside some of our most elite units. He paused, letting that sink in, then continued. But here's the most important thing you need to know about Sergeant Mitchell. She's the daughter of Master Sergeant William Mitchell, one of the finest Delta Force operators this country ever produced. And she's the best shooter I've ever commanded in my 30 years of military service. The recruits' faces had gone from confused to mortified. Cooper looked like he wanted the ground to swallow him. Morrison wasn't done. I came to this base specifically to discuss with Sergeant Mitchell a new role we're developing. The reason many of our special operations personnel are as effective as they are is because of marksmen like her who can provide overwatch in conditions most shooters would consider impossible. The silence was profound. Colonel Blake added, Sergeant Mitchell doesn't advertise her credentials. She believes shooters should prove themselves through performance, not reputation. But I think today's demonstration made her capabilities pretty clear. Sarah remained at ease, her expression neutral, not enjoying their embarrassment, but not sympathizing with it either. This was a teaching moment, and they needed to learn. General Morrison turned to her. Sergeant Mitchell, I'm here because we need to discuss your next assignment, but first I'd like to see you run these recruits through the advanced course. Show them what real marksmanship looks like. Yes, sir. Happy to do that. Morrison looked at the recruits. You gentlemen are about to receive world-class instruction from one of the best in the business. I suggest you pay attention. The obstacle course punishment can wait. This is more important. Over the next 3 hours, Sarah conducted a master class in long-range shooting. She explained the physics of bullet trajectory, the effects of temperature and humidity on ballistics, the proper breathing techniques for stable shooting, and the mental discipline required for precision marksmanship. The recruits, chastened by their earlier mockery, paid attention with an intensity they'd probably never shown before. They watched her shoot, studied her techniques, and began to understand the massive gap between basic marksmanship and true sniper-level precision. She demonstrated shots they'd thought impossible, hitting targets at 1,000 meters, adjusting for crosswinds that changed mid-flight, compensating for elevation differences, and even the Coriolis effect on extreme range shots. Cooper, who'd been the most vocal mocker, asked a question during a break. Sergeant Mitchell, ma'am, how did you get this good? I mean, I've been shooting since I was 12, and I'm nowhere near your level. Sarah considered the question seriously. Experience matters, but it's not just time. It's deliberate practice focused on understanding every variable that affects your shot. Most shooters practice until they can hit the target. Professional marksmen practice until they can hit the exact same point on the target repeatedly under any conditions. She continued, that requires understanding physics, meteorology, and ballistics at a level most people don't bother with. But there's something else more important than technical knowledge. It's the mindset. When people underestimate you because you're female or young or don't fit their image of what a shooter should be, you have two choices. Get angry and defensive, or use it as motivation to be so undeniably excellent that their assumptions become irrelevant. I chose the second option. Another recruit asked, Ma'am, do you still get people who don't take you seriously, even with your record? All the time, Sarah replied honestly. I walk into ranges or training facilities regularly where people assume I'm administrative staff or maybe a decent hobbyist shooter. It used to frustrate me. Now I see it as an opportunity to teach a lesson about judging capability based on performance rather than appearance. General Morrison, who'd been observing the training, spoke up. And that's exactly why we're updating our training approach based on Sergeant Mitchell's methods. She teaches shooters to focus on measurable performance, grouping size, consistency under various conditions, effectiveness at range, instead of subjective assessments based on strength, size, or gender. Her students outperformed traditionally trained marksmen because they learn the fundamentals so thoroughly that physical differences become irrelevant. By the end of the session, the recruits had a completely different understanding of marksmanship and a profound respect for the quiet sergeant they'd mocked hours earlier. As they prepared to leave, Cooper approached Sarah. Ma'am, I owe you an apology. The things I said earlier about you not being able to handle the M24, about not having experience, I was completely out of line. You're the most skilled shooter I've ever seen, and I'm sorry I judged you based on stupid assumptions. Sarah nodded, accepting the apology. Use this as a learning experience. In the military and in life, people will constantly make assumptions about your capabilities based on how you look, where you're from, or who they think you should be. Prove them wrong through performance. Let your results speak louder than their assumptions. The other recruits echoed Cooper's apology. They'd learned a hard lesson about respect, capability, and the danger of underestimating people based on appearance. After they left to run their promised obstacle course, Morrison had decided they still needed that reminder. The general asked Sarah to join him and Colonel Blake in the briefing room. Sergeant Mitchell, Morrison began, your demonstration today reminded me why I came here. We need you at Fort Bragg as the lead instructor for the new advanced sniper training program. You'd be training not just Army snipers, but cross-service students from Marines, Navy, and Air Force. Essentially, you'd be shaping the future of military marksmanship. Sarah felt both honored and hesitant. Sir, I appreciate the opportunity, but I should mention I've received similar offers before, and there's always institutional resistance. Some senior instructors don't like the idea of a female lead instructor. Some students always show up with the same attitudes those recruits had today. Morrison leaned forward. I won't lie to you, you're right. There will be resistance. There will be students and instructors who need attitude adjustments. But that's exactly why we need you in this position. The students who are professional enough to focus on learning will get world-class instruction. The ones who aren't will either adapt or fail. Either outcome improves the force. Colonel Blake added, Sarah, you've been proving yourself for years. At some point, the burden shouldn't be on you to justify your position. It should be on others to meet your standards. This assignment puts you in a position to set those standards force-wide. Sarah considered. They were right. She'd spent her entire career proving herself to skeptics. Taking this position meant she could shape training in a way that focused on capability over demographics, on performance over assumptions. But there was something else, something she hadn't shared with Morrison or Blake. Her private investigation into Operation Phantom and her father's death had reached a critical point. Recent intelligence suggested Zakharov was still alive, possibly operating under a new identity. Fort Bragg would give her access to classified archives to personnel who might have been involved in the operation. I'll do it, sir, but on one condition. What's that? Every student who shows up with the attitude that females can't shoot that size determines capability, or that marksmanship is about strength rather than skill, they get the exact same treatment those recruits got today. I demonstrate they attempt, and when they fail, they learn the lesson properly. Morrison smiled. I wouldn't have it any other way. What neither Morrison nor Blake knew was that Sarah had a second unspoken condition. This new position wouldn't just be about teaching the next generation of military marksmen. It would be about uncovering the truth about Operation Phantom, about finding Zakharov, and about finally learning who had really been responsible for her father's death. As they left the briefing room, Sarah caught a glimpse of her reflection in a window. For a moment, she saw her father's determination in her own eyes. The same unflinching focus, the same quiet resolve. I'm coming for them, Dad, she thought, whoever they are. The hunt for Phantom had begun. 3 months later, Sarah Mitchell stood at the entrance to Fort Bragg's advanced sniper training facility. The early morning Carolina air hung heavy with humidity, the sprawling military installation just beginning to stir with activity. She paused, taking in the sight of the place that would become both her proving ground and her battlefield in the search for truth. The facility itself was underwhelming, a cluster of weathered buildings, some dating back to the Second World War, a firing range that had seen better days, equipment that appeared at least a decade out of date, not exactly the cutting-edge training center one might expect for shaping the future of military marksmanship. Not quite what you were hoping for. Sarah turned to find Master Sergeant James Harrison approaching a coffee cup in one hand and a worn leather briefcase in the other. In the 3 months since their meeting at Fort Carson, he had been reassigned as her senior advisor in the new program. Another string pulled by General Morrison. I've worked with less, Sarah replied, surveying the facility again. But if we're supposed to be training the next generation of elite marksmen, this isn't going to cut it. Harrison nodded in agreement. Budget constraints, always the excuse. The truth is most of the brass still see sniper training as secondary to more glamorous programs. Drones, smart bombs, the future of warfare they call it. Until they need someone to make an impossible shot from 2,000 meters to save an operation. Exactly. Harrison gestured toward the main administrative building. Come on, the rest of the staff is waiting. Not all of them are thrilled about your appointment. Sarah had expected as much. Her reputation in specialized circles had grown, but so had the resistance to her promotion. A female lead instructor for what had traditionally been one of the military's most male-dominated specialties was unprecedented. Add to that her relatively young age and the resistance was practically guaranteed. Inside the briefing room, 5 men sat around a conference table. 4 of them stood as Sarah entered. The 5th, a broad-shouldered man in his 40s with close-cropped gray hair and the weathered face of a career soldier, remained seated, arms crossed over his chest. "Gentlemen," Harrison said, "allow me to introduce Staff Sergeant Sarah Mitchell, your new lead instructor." The standing men offered handshakes and introductions. Master Sergeant Thomas Wilson, ballistics specialist. Sergeant First Class Michael Rodriguez, fieldcraft instructor. Sergeant Carlos Mendez, technology integration specialist. Sergeant Brian Taylor, medical and survival instructor. The seated man finally rose his movements, deliberate, almost challenging. "Captain Robert Reynolds," he said without offering his hand, "tactical operations." Sarah recognized the name immediately, the same Captain Reynolds who had objected to her specialized training years earlier. The man who believed women had no place in combat roles or sniper operations. "Captain," she acknowledged, meeting his gaze directly. "I've heard about your work with Delta." A flicker of surprise crossed Reynolds' face, quickly replaced by suspicion. "And I've heard about your achievements. 47 confirmed kills if the reports are accurate." The implication was clear. He doubted the authenticity of her record. "The reports are accurate," Harrison interjected. "I verified them myself." Reynolds shrugged. "No disrespect intended. I'm sure Sergeant Mitchell has made valuable contributions in her support role. I simply wonder whether exceptional circumstances in the field translate to exceptional teaching capabilities." Before Sarah could respond, Harrison placed his briefcase on the table. "General Morrison believes they do. And since he outranks everyone in this room, I suggest we focus on implementing his vision rather than questioning it." Reynolds' jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Of course. I'm sure we all want the program to succeed." The tension in the room was palpable as Harrison outlined the program objectives. A 3-month advanced course designed to train elite marksmen from across all military branches. Candidates would be selected from the top performers in their respective services. The goal: produce a new generation of precision shooters capable of operating in environments and at distances previously considered beyond effective range. "The Mitchell method, they're calling it in some circles," Harrison explained, nodding toward Sarah, "integrating advanced ballistic science with environmental awareness and psychological conditioning." "The Mitchell method?" Reynolds raised an eyebrow. "Named after Sergeant Mitchell. I presume rather presumptuous for someone so new to the teaching side of operations." Sarah kept her expression neutral. "Actually, it's named after my father, Master Sergeant William Mitchell, Delta Force. His approach to precision shooting formed the foundation of my training. I've simply expanded on his techniques." The mention of William Mitchell's name changed the atmosphere in the room. Even Reynolds seemed momentarily disarmed. "William Mitchell was your father?" Sergeant Wilson asked. "Ghost 6. The legend himself?" "Yes." Wilson whistled softly. "I trained under him briefly in the 90s. Man could shoot the wings off a fly at 1,000 meters. Never knew he had a daughter following in his footsteps." Reynolds recovered quickly. "A distinguished lineage, certainly. But we're developing a modern training program, not trading on past glories. I'd like to see Sergeant Mitchell's curriculum before we proceed further." Sarah opened her own briefcase and distributed folders containing her proposed training methodology. Over the past 3 months, she had meticulously documented everything she had learned from her father, from Harrison, and from her own combat experiences. The result was a comprehensive approach that challenged much of the traditional wisdom about sniper training. "This is unorthodox," Reynolds said after reviewing the materials. "You're proposing significant departures from established protocols." "Established protocols designed primarily for male shooters with specific physical attributes," Sarah countered. "The core of my approach is that with proper technique and understanding of ballistic science, those physical differences become largely irrelevant. A 5'6" woman can be just as effective as a 6'2" man if she masters the fundamentals." Reynolds closed the folder. "Theory is one thing, practical application is another. I'd like to see a demonstration before we commit to overhauling our entire curriculum." "Fair enough," Sarah agreed. "The range tomorrow morning. I'll demonstrate the core principles with practical applications." As the meeting adjourned, Harrison hung back with Sarah in the briefing room. "Reynolds is going to be a problem," he said once they were alone. "He was in line for this position before Morrison appointed you." "I'm not surprised." Sarah gathered her materials. "But if he's as professional as his reputation suggests, he'll put the mission above his personal feelings." Harrison's expression suggested he wasn't convinced. "There's something else you should know. Reynolds served with your father." Sarah stopped packing her briefcase. "What, when?" Early 2000s, they were part of the same Delta unit for a while. I don't know the details, but there was some kind of falling out between them. Bad blood. This was new information. In all her research into her father's career, Reynolds' name had never surfaced. Why are you telling me this now? Harrison leaned closer, lowering his voice despite the empty room. Because I've been doing some digging of my own. About Operation Phantom. About what really happened to your father. And Reynolds' name keeps appearing on the periphery of the mission documentation. Sarah felt a chill run through her. Are you saying he was involved in my father's death? I'm saying be careful, watch your back, and maybe consider that this assignment isn't just about teaching snipers. It might be your best chance to find the answers you're looking for. Later that night, alone in her temporary quarters, Sarah added this new information to her journal. The connection between Reynolds and her father was unexpected, but potentially significant. If Reynolds had been part of the Operation Phantom team, or even just connected to it, he might have information about Zakharov and the true circumstances of William Mitchell's death. But pursuing that angle would require subtlety. Reynolds was already suspicious of her presence. Asking direct questions would only increase his guard. She would need to be patient to observe to gather information gradually. As she reviewed her notes, a pattern began to emerge. The scattered references to Operation Phantom all pointed to a classified mission targeting not just Zakharov, but a broader conspiracy involving biological weapons research that had continued after the official programs were shut down. Names appeared and reappeared across different reports, Zakharov obviously, but also someone referred to only as the facilitator, and whispers of a project called Osiris. Sarah opened her laptop and connected to the secure military network. Her new position granted her access to certain classified databases that had previously been beyond her reach. She began searching carefully and methodically for any references to Osiris. The results were sparse but tantalizing. Fragments of redacted documents, brief mentions and after-action reports. Nothing comprehensive, but enough to confirm that Osiris was real and connected to both Zakharov and her father's final mission. A knock at her door interrupted her research. Sarah quickly closed the laptop and moved to answer. Harrison stood in the hallway, his expression grim. We need to talk, not here. 20 minutes later, they sat in Harrison's truck parked at the edge of a wooded training area far from the barracks and administrative buildings. I shouldn't be showing you this, Harrison said, handing Sarah a USB drive. But you deserve to know. Sarah inserted the drive into her laptop. A single video file appeared. The timestamp indicated it had been recorded 2 days before her father's death. The footage was grainy, captured by what appeared to be a helmet camera. It showed a Delta Force team approaching a compound in rugged mountain terrain. Her father's voice was audible, giving tactical commands to the team. This is from the Operation Phantom raid, Harrison explained. The footage was supposed to be destroyed after the mission, all evidence erased. But I had a friend in intelligence who made a copy before it disappeared from the official record. Sarah watched transfixed as the team breached the compound. The operation was textbook Delta Force, precise, coordinated, lethal. Within minutes, they had secured the facility and begun searching for their primary target. Zakharov isn't here, her father's voice reported. But we've got something else. Documents, research materials. Looks like plans for a biological agent delivery system. The camera panned across laboratory equipment papers covered with chemical formulas and what appeared to be prototype devices for aerosol dispersal. My God, another voice said off camera. They're planning to weaponize this. Civilian targets. American cities. The footage continued as the team gathered evidence, downloading computer files, photographing documents, collecting samples. Then her father's voice, again urgent this time. Reynolds, we need extraction now. This is bigger than we thought. The Osiris protocol isn't just Zakharov. There are Americans involved. High level. The video abruptly ended. That's all there is, Harrison said. The rest was either never recorded or deliberately erased. Sarah stared at the frozen final frame. Reynolds was there. He was part of the team. He was their communications specialist, responsible for coordinating with the command and extraction forces. And hours later, the extraction helicopter was shot down, killing everyone aboard. Sarah's mind raced with implications. Everyone except Reynolds, apparently. Harrison nodded. He was reportedly injured during the operation and evacuated separately before the main team. Convenient timing. You think he betrayed them? Had something to do with the helicopter being shot down? I don't know, but the fact that he's now positioned himself against you, the daughter of William Mitchell, strikes me as more than coincidence. Sarah closed the laptop. I need more evidence. This is suggestive but not conclusive. Be careful, Sarah. If Reynolds is involved, if he had anything to do with your father's death, then he's dangerous. And he has connections in places we don't know about. The next morning, Sarah arrived at the firing range before dawn. The demonstration for Reynolds and the other instructors wasn't scheduled until 8, but she wanted time to prepare to check the conditions to ensure everything was optimal. This wasn't just about proving her methods worked. It was about establishing her authority in a way that even Reynolds couldn't question. She was surprised to find she wasn't alone. Sergeant Wilson, the ballistics specialist, was already there setting up equipment and checking wind flags. Thought you might want to get an early start, he said by way of greeting. Figured I could help set up the more advanced demonstrations. Sarah studied him, trying to gauge his motives. Thanks, I appreciate it. Wilson shrugged. For what it's worth, I think Reynolds is wrong. I've reviewed your methodology. It's solid. Revolutionary even. The focus on environmental mathematics over pure physical technique, it's where the discipline needs to go. Not everyone agrees. Change is hard, especially for guys like Reynolds who came up in the old school. Wilson checked a handheld weather meter. Your father understood that, you know. He was always pushing for evolution in our training methods, even back when I knew him. You said you trained under him. Wilson nodded. Joint Operations Course 97. I was just a kid, really. But your father saw something in me. Took me aside, taught me things that weren't in the official curriculum. Changed my whole approach to precision shooting. This aligned with everything Sarah knew about her father. William Mitchell had been a natural teacher, always looking to pass on knowledge to elevate those around him. What do you know about Reynolds' connection to my father? Sarah asked, trying to sound casual. Wilson's hands paused on the equipment he was setting up. They had history, not all good. Your father reported Reynolds for an ethical violation during an operation in South America. Something about excessive force with civilians. Reynolds was cleared, but the investigation put a permanent mark in his file. Probably cost him at least one promotion. When was this? Early 2000s, before Afghanistan. Wilson seemed to hesitate. Look, I shouldn't be talking about this. Office politics and ancient history don't mix well with training programs. I understand. Just trying to get a sense of the personnel dynamics. By 7:30, the range was prepared. Sarah had set up a series of increasingly difficult shooting scenarios designed to demonstrate the core principles of her methodology. Standard targets at varying distances, but also specialized scenarios involving angular shooting positions, variable wind conditions, and extreme range engagements. At precisely 8 o'clock, Reynolds arrived with the other instructors and Harrison. The captain's expression was neutral, but Sarah detected a glint of something like anticipation in his eyes. He expected her to fail, wanted her to fail. Gentlemen, Sarah began, today I'll be demonstrating the practical applications of the methodology we discussed yesterday. We'll start with standard qualification distances to establish a baseline, then move to more challenging scenarios. She picked up an M24 sniper rifle identical to the one she had used at Fort Carson. The first principle is that fundamentals matter more than physical attributes. Proper breathing technique, trigger discipline, and positioning create stability regardless of the shooter's size or strength. As Sarah demonstrated with 3 shots at standard qualification distances, all perfect center mass hits as expected. The instructors nodded but weren't particularly impressed. Any qualified sniper could make those shots. Now for the differentiating factors, Sarah continued. Most training focuses on ideal conditions. My approach emphasizes adaptation to non-ideal variables. She moved to a different firing position where the only available stance required shooting at an awkward upward angle, similar to urban combat scenarios or mountainous terrain. Traditional methods emphasize upper body strength to maintain stability in these positions, Sarah explained. My approach uses leverage and bone support rather than muscle tension. She demonstrated making 5 consecutive shots that formed a tight grouping despite the challenging angle. Even Reynolds looked marginally impressed. Next, environmental compensation. Sarah moved to another station where a sophisticated weather monitoring system displayed real-time data on wind speed, direction, humidity, and temperature. Most snipers are taught basic wind calling, but at extreme distances, you need to account for multiple wind vectors, temperature gradients, and even the Coriolis effect. She picked up a different rifle, a Chaytak M200 intervention chambered in .408 caliber, capable of effective shots beyond 2,000 meters. The target was positioned at 1,500 meters, well beyond the range most military snipers were expected to engage effectively. At this distance, even breathing creates sufficient movement to miss the target, Sarah explained. My method incorporates mathematical modeling with physical control. She entered data into a ballistic calculator, made several adjustments to her scope, then settled into position. Her breathing slowed, became almost imperceptible. She took the shot during the natural respiratory pause between exhale and inhale. Through spotting scopes, the instructors could see the round impact perfectly center mass on the distant target. Impressive, Wilson admitted, but also heavily dependent on technology. What happens when the equipment fails? Sarah nodded. Excellent question. The second phase of training teaches shooters to internalize these calculations, to feel the environmental factors rather than simply measuring them. She put aside the ballistic calculator and picked up an older M48 sniper rifle, the kind used by Marine Corps snipers with simpler optical equipment. I'll now engage targets at varying distances without technology assistance, she announced. Sergeant Rodriguez, would you call out random distances between 300 and 1,200 meters? Rodriguez nodded. 800 meters. Sarah located the target, made mental calculations, adjusted her scope, and fired. Perfect hit. 450 meters. Another perfect shot. 100 meters. The most challenging distance yet, especially without technological assistance. Sarah took slightly longer, feeling the wind, making minute adjustments. She fired. Another hit. Damn, Mendez whispered. She's not even using a rangefinder. Reynolds had remained silent throughout the demonstration, his expression increasingly difficult to read. Now he stepped forward. Very impressive marksmanship, Sergeant Mitchell. But shooting under controlled range conditions is one thing. Combat effectiveness is another. How does your methodology address the psychological factors of taking human lives at extreme distances? It was a legitimate question, but Sarah detected the trap underneath. Reynolds was shifting the conversation away from observable skills to subjective factors that couldn't be demonstrated. The psychological aspects are integrated throughout the training, Sarah replied. We incorporate realistic scenario training, ethical decision-making exercises, and stress inoculation techniques developed by combat psychologists. Reynolds nodded, seemingly satisfied with the answer. But then he made an unexpected move. I'd like to propose an additional demonstration. Something more, realistic. He turned to Harrison. With your permission, Master Sergeant. Harrison looked wary. What did you have in mind? A field exercise. Tonight, full tactical scenario in the training area. Sergeant Mitchell can demonstrate how her methodology performs under actual operational conditions. Sarah understood immediately what Reynolds was doing. He was changing the parameters, moving from a controlled demonstration where her skills were undeniable to an environment with more variables, more opportunities for failure. But she also recognized the opportunity. If she excelled in Reynolds' challenge, it would further cement her authority. And a night operation would provide cover for her to potentially access Reynolds' office, search for information about Operation Phantom and Osiris. I accept, she said before Harrison could object. Full tactical scenario, tonight. Reynolds smiled thinly. Excellent. I'll make the arrangements. Shall we say 2,000 hours, full combat load, standard sniper team configuration? As the instructors dispersed after the demonstration, Harrison pulled Sarah aside. You know what he's doing, right? Setting you up to fail. Of course, but sometimes you have to walk into a trap to spring it. Harrison studied her. You're playing a dangerous game, Sarah. I learned from the best. She glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard. While Reynolds is running his scenario tonight, I need access to his office. There might be information about Operation Phantom about my father. That's a serious breach of regulations. If you're caught, I know the risks. But I need to know the truth. About my father, about Zakharov, about Osiris. Harrison sighed heavily. I can get you 20 minutes, maybe 30. Not more. Reynolds keeps his office locked, but as program coordinator, I have master keys. That's all I need. At 1900 hours, Sarah prepared for Reynolds' tactical scenario. She selected her equipment carefully, an M24 sniper rifle for versatility, a suppressed M23 sidearm for close encounters, night vision goggles, and standard tactical gear. Everything meticulously checked and double-checked. Wilson had been assigned as her spotter for the exercise, which Sarah suspected was Reynolds' idea. Wilson had shown support for her methods. Pairing them was likely an attempt to create friction or division among the instructors. "Any idea what Reynolds has planned?" Sarah asked as they geared up. Wilson shook his head. "He's been tight-lipped. All I know is it's some kind of infiltration scenario. Multiple objectives, multiple potential engagement zones. Standard evaluation template, then. Nothing we haven't done before." "There's one thing," Wilson added. "Reynolds brought in some friends from Delta to play opposition forces, guys he's worked with before. They're using simunition, but they're taking it seriously." That raised a warning flag. Reynolds was stacking the deck, bringing in experienced operators who would know every counter-sniper tactic in the book. "Good to know," Sarah said. "We'll adapt accordingly." At the edge of the training area, Reynolds waited with Harrison and the other instructors. Behind them, several hard-faced men in tactical gear whom Sarah didn't recognize. The Delta operators, presumably. Sergeant Mitchell Reynolds began all military professionalism now. "Your mission is to infiltrate the training area, locate and identify 3 high-value targets, and execute simulated eliminations without being detected. Opposition forces will be actively patrolling. If they spot you, they will engage. If you're hit with simunition, the exercise ends in failure." Standard parameters for a sniper evaluation, though, typically conducted with regular training staff, not Delta Force operators. "The HVTs can be identified by red armbands," Reynolds continued. "You have 3 hours to complete all objectives and extract to the safe zone at the north end of the training area." Questions. "Rules of engagement," Sarah asked. "Eliminate the HVTs cleanly. Avoid engaging security forces unless absolutely necessary for mission completion or self-defense." Mission intelligence. Reynolds handed her a thin folder. "Basic layout of the training area and approximate patrol routes. Minimal as you'd often have in actual operations." Sarah reviewed the materials quickly. The training area covered nearly 5 square kilometers of wooded terrain with various structures representing an enemy compound. The 3 HVTs would be moving between structures according to a schedule not provided in the intelligence packet. Opposition forces would be patrolling in standard security patterns. It was a challenging but fair scenario, at least on paper. The question was whether Reynolds had added any unofficial elements designed to ensure her failure. "I understand the parameters," Sarah said, closing the folder. "Wilson and I are ready to proceed." Reynolds nodded. "Opposition forces have already deployed. You may begin when ready." As Sarah and Wilson moved toward the training area boundary, Harrison approached quickly. "I'll handle the other matter we discussed," he said quietly. "Good luck out there. Watch your back." Sarah nodded, understanding the double meaning. Harrison would access Reynolds' office while she was occupied with the scenario. And the warning to watch her back wasn't just about the exercise. The tactical scenario began smoothly enough. Sarah and Wilson moved through the darkened training area with practiced efficiency, using night vision to navigate the unfamiliar terrain. They established their first observation post on a small rise overlooking what the intelligence packet identified as the main compound area. "Movement at 2 o'clock, Wilson whispered, peering through his spotting scope. "Patrol of 2 standard perimeter check," Sarah observed through her rifle scope. "Regular interval, predictable pattern. No signs of heightened alert." They watched for 20 minutes, mapping patrol routes, identifying blind spots, establishing timing patterns. Standard infiltration preparation. Nothing in the opposition force's behavior suggested anything beyond a typical training scenario. "There," Wilson said suddenly. "Building 3. Figure in the window, red armband." Sarah shifted her scope. The target was visible briefly through a second-floor window, then disappeared into the interior of the structure. "HVT-1 confirmed," she noted. "Stationary position, interior room, limited visibility. We'll need closer observation." They relocated to a new position, moving silently through the underbrush, maintaining noise and light discipline. The new observation post provided sight lines to all 3 main structures in the compound. Over the next hour, they identified all three high-value targets, tracking their movements, establishing patterns. HVT ISIL-1 remained primarily in the main building. HVT-2 moved between structures regularly. HVT-3 patrolled the perimeter with a security detail. Assessment, Sarah asked once they had sufficient intelligence. Wilson considered. HVT-2 is the most accessible, predictable movement pattern between buildings momentarily exposed at multiple points. HVT-1 requires precision shooting through a window, limited engagement opportunity. HVT-3 is problematic, constantly surrounded by security. Recommendations. Eliminate HVT-2. First, use the resulting confusion to create an engagement opportunity for HVT-1, then relocate to intercept HVT-3 when security protocols shift in response. It was solid tactical thinking, exactly what Sarah would have suggested. Agreed. Let's move to position Alpha for the first engagement. They relocated to a concealed position approximately 400 meters from the path HVT-2 regularly traveled. The distance was well within effective range, but far enough to minimize the chance of detection. Sarah settled behind her rifle, making minute adjustments for the light wind and slight elevation difference. Wilson monitored the security patrols through his spotting scope. Target approaching waypoint, he reported after several minutes. 30 seconds to optimal firing position. Sarah controlled her breathing, finding that perfect stillness her father had taught her years ago. Through her scope, she tracked the approaching figure, noting the red armband that identified him as a legitimate target. "Send it," Wilson whispered as the target reached the predetermined position. Sarah squeezed the trigger. The simunition round struck the target squarely in the center of mass. He immediately dropped, following training protocol for a successful hit. "Hit confirmed," Wilson said. "Security responding." As predicted, the opposition forces reacted to the apparent attack, security patrols converging on the location of HVT-2, creating momentary gaps in their coverage. HVT-1 moving to the window, Wilson reported. Probable response to security alert. Sarah had already shifted her position, rifle trained on the window, where the first target had been spotted earlier. As predicted, a figure appeared identifiable by the red armband. Second shot, second hit. Perfect execution. 2 down, Sarah confirmed. Opposition forces in disarray. Relocating for final objective. They moved quickly but cautiously to their third pre-selected position, one that overlooked the likely evacuation route for the remaining high-value target. If security protocols followed standard procedures, HVT-3 would be moved to a secondary location via the most defensible route. Multiple figures approaching from the east. Wilson reported once they were in position. 4-man security details surrounding a single individual. Red armband visible. Sarah observed through her scope. The scenario was unfolding exactly as they had predicted. The final target was being evacuated along the most logical route, surrounded by security. "Engagement assessment?" she asked. Wilson calculated quickly. Limited window. Security is tight, maintaining overlapping fields of view. Recommend waiting until they reach the bend in the path. Momentary exposure, minimal cover. Agreed. They waited patiently as the group moved along the path. Sarah tracked them through her scope, identifying the precise moment when the target would be most vulnerable. "Now," Wilson whispered. Sarah took the shot. Clean hit, center mass. "Target down," Wilson confirmed. "All objectives complete. Beginning extraction." But as they prepared to move toward the extraction point, something changed. The opposition forces, instead of acknowledging the successful completion of the scenario, began converging on their position with unexpected precision. "Something's wrong," Sarah said. "They shouldn't know our location." Wilson scanned the area with his night vision. Multiple teams approaching from different directions. This isn't part of the standard protocol. Sarah realized immediately what had happened. Reynolds changed the parameters. He's making this personal. They quickly gathered their equipment and began a tactical retreat, moving away from the approaching opposition forces. Standard evasion techniques utilizing terrain and concealment to break line of sight. But the opposing forces moved with the coordinated precision of experienced Delta operators. Each time Sarah and Wilson changed direction, they found their path, anticipated forces moving to intercept. "They know our extraction point," Wilson realized. "They're not trying to find us, they're setting up an ambush on our exfiltration route." Sarah processed this information quickly. Reynolds had given them the extraction coordinates, presumably shared those same coordinates with the opposition forces. a trap designed to ensure she failed the exercise. New plans, she decided. We're not going to the designated extraction point. We're creating our own. Wilson looked surprised but nodded. Lead the way. Sarah studied their position relative to the training area boundaries. We go west, cross the stream, where it narrows, then circle back to the north edge of the training area. Not where they expect, but still technically within parameters. They move quickly using every technique in their special operations playbook to evade detection. Covering tracks using water features to break scent trails, creating false leads. The skills Sarah had learned in Afghanistan tracking insurgents through mountain passes and evading counter-sniper teams. After 40 minutes of careful navigation, they reached the western boundary of the training area. No sign of opposition forces. They're still focused on the designated extraction point, Wilson observed. We've got a clean route north. They made their way along the western boundary, then turned east to approach the northern edge of the training area. According to the mission parameters, reaching any point along the northern boundary would constitute successful extraction. As they approached their self-designated extraction point, Sarah noticed something unusual. A single figure waiting in the darkness, barely visible, even with night vision. Hold, she whispered to Wilson. Possible opposition at 12 o'clock. Wilson observed through his scope. Can't confirm identity. No obvious tactical gear. Doesn't move like the other opposition forces. Sarah considered their options. Avoid entirely by choosing a different extraction point. Attempt to neutralize the potential threat. Observe longer to determine intent. Before she could decide, the figure moved, stepping into a slightly clearer area. Recognition dawned immediately. It's Reynolds, Sarah said. He's alone. Why would he be here? This isn't anywhere near the designated extraction point. Because he knows me better than I thought, Sarah realized. He anticipated I'd create my own extraction route rather than walk into an ambush. They approached cautiously, maintaining tactical discipline until they were within speaking distance of the captain. Reynolds stood with his arms crossed, a grudging respect visible in his expression even in the dim light. Creative Solutions, Sergeant Mitchell, he said as they approached. Most candidates would have continued to the designated extraction point right into the waiting opposition force. Most candidates haven't spent time evading Taliban counter-sniper teams in the Hindu Kush, Sarah replied. The mission parameters specified reaching the northern boundary, not a specific extraction point. Reynolds nodded. Technically correct. All three high-value targets eliminated successful extraction completed within the time limit. By any objective measure, you've passed the evaluation. There was something in his tone, a reluctant acknowledgement that she hadn't expected. For the first time since meeting him, Sarah sensed genuine respect beneath the antagonism. Thank you, sir, she said, maintaining professional courtesy. Will that be all? Reynolds seemed to hesitate, as if considering saying something more. Then his radio crackled to life. Captain Reynolds, this is command. We have a situation requiring immediate attention. All instructors report to the main briefing room. Reynolds answered the radio, confirming the order. Then he turned back to Sarah and Wilson. Exercise complete. Report for debriefing at 0700 tomorrow. He paused, then added, Good work, Sergeant Mitchell. Genuinely impressive tactical thinking. As Reynolds departed, Sarah exchanged a glance with Wilson. Something had changed in the dynamic between her and the captain. Not friendship, certainly not trust, but perhaps a grudging professional respect. What do you think that emergency call was about? Wilson asked as they began walking back toward the base facilities. Sarah checked her watch. Nearly midnight. The timing aligned perfectly with when Harrison would have been in Reynolds' office. Had he been discovered? Was the emergency call a cover story to explain why senior staff were gathering at this hour? I don't know, she said, but I intend to find out. When they reached the main compound, Sarah parted ways with Wilson and made directly for the administrative building. The lights were on in the briefing room, voices audible even from outside. She approached cautiously, not wanting to draw attention to herself. Through a window, she could see Harrison Reynolds and the other instructors gathered around a conference table. General Morrison was present as well, speaking via video conference on a large screen. The general's expression was grave. Sarah moved closer to the window, straining to hear what was being said. Confirmed sighting, Morrison was saying. Intelligence is certain. Zakharov is alive and operational. Sarah froze at the mention of that name. Location, Reynolds asked. Caucasus region near the Russian-Georgian border. Remote compound heavily secured. He's resumed his research apparently with new backing. Osiris, Harrison asked. Morrison nodded on the screen. Intelligence indicates the Osiris protocol is active again. Biological agent development potential delivery system for urban targets. Just like Operation Phantom, Reynolds said quietly. History repeating itself. Exactly, Morrison confirmed, which is why we're activating a response team immediately. This time we finish what Ghost 6 started. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. This wasn't a coincidence. The sudden emergency meeting about Zakharov, about Osiris, about her father's final mission. It connected too perfectly with her own investigation. Team composition, sir, Reynolds asked. Special Task Force cross-service. Best people we have, including some from your training program. Morrison leaned forward on the screen. I want Sergeant Mitchell as primary sniper. A murmur went through the room. Reynolds looked surprised, but not as outraged as Sarah might have expected. Sir, with all due respect, he began. Sergeant Mitchell is an excellent marksman, but this operation requires someone with more direct experience in these kinds of missions. Someone like you, Captain, Morrison asked. I have relevant experience, yes. I was part of Operation Phantom. I know what we're dealing with. Precisely why you'll be tactical commander, Morrison replied. But Mitchell has demonstrated exceptional capabilities in extreme environmental conditions. The Caucasus location will require shots at ranges and in conditions that few snipers can handle reliably. Based on tonight's evaluation, she's clearly qualified. Reynolds appeared to accept this reasoning, though reluctantly. Understood, sir. Good. Full briefing tomorrow at 0800. Team deploys within 48 hours. Morrison's image disappeared as the video conference ended. Sarah moved quickly away from the window before anyone inside could notice her presence. Her mind raced with implications. Zakharov alive. Osiris active again. A mission directly connected to her father's death. And she was being assigned as the primary sniper. It was almost too perfect. The answers she had been seeking for years were suddenly within reach. But the coincidence troubled her. Had Harrison found something in Reynolds' office that prompted this? Had Morrison known about her private investigation all along? Or was this an elaborate trap? She made her way to Harrison's quarters, hoping to intercept him after the meeting. There were too many questions, too many potential connections to process alone. 20 minutes later, Harrison arrived looking exhausted but alert. He seemed unsurprised to find Sarah waiting. You heard, he said, not a question. Zakharov, Osiris, a mission to the Caucasus, and apparently I'm the primary sniper. Sarah studied his face. What did you find in Reynolds' office? Harrison closed the door behind him, checking to ensure they were truly private before answering. Nothing explicit about your father's death, but plenty about Zakharov and Osiris. He pulled a small flash drive from his pocket. I copied what I could. Correspondence between Reynolds and someone identified only as the facilitator. References to ongoing biological weapons research. And this. He handed Sarah a printed photograph. It showed a younger Reynolds standing alongside a tall, thin man with cold eyes and a scholar's bearing. The background suggested somewhere in Eastern Europe or Russia. Viktor Zakharov, Harrison identified. This was taken in 2001 after Zakharov supposedly cut ties with American intelligence. Reynolds maintained contact apparently without authorization. Sarah studied the photograph. They look like colleagues, not adversaries. Exactly my concern. The official record states that Reynolds was injured during Operation Phantom before the extraction helicopter was shot down. But what if he wasn't injured? What if he orchestrated the attack? The implication was staggering. You think Reynolds betrayed my father's team, had them killed to protect Zakharov and the Osiris research? I think the evidence points in that direction. And now, conveniently, Reynolds is assigned as tactical commander for a mission to eliminate Zakharov. Perfect opportunity to ensure any remaining evidence disappears forever. Sarah considered this. And I'm being sent as the sniper. Why, if Reynolds is involved, wouldn't he want me as far from this mission as possible? Unless he didn't have a choice. Morrison specifically requested you, or... Harrison hesitated. Or what? Or Reynolds wants you there for a reason. The daughter of William Mitchell killed in action during a classified mission targeting the same objective her father died trying to reach. Harrison's expression was grim. It would be poetic from a certain perspective. and it would eliminate the one person still asking questions about Operation Phantom. Sarah felt a chill at the possibility. So I'm walking into a trap. Possibly, but also your best chance to find the truth about what happened to your father. Harrison indicated the flash drive. Review this material. Tomorrow's briefing will reveal more, but be careful what you say. If Reynolds is involved in a conspiracy around Osiris, he has powerful allies. The kind of people who can make problems disappear. Like my father, Sarah said quietly. Exactly like your father. Later, alone in her quarters, Sarah reviewed the material Harrison had copied from Reynolds' office. The correspondence was cryptic, obviously designed to obscure specific details, but patterns emerged. References to continuing the work, despite official termination. Mentions of alternative funding sources and private sector applications, and repeated emphasis on ensuring security through compartmentalization. Most troubling were the references to Ghost 6, her father's call sign, as a regrettable operational loss and necessary sacrifice for long-term objectives. The implications were clear. Reynolds had been involved in something beyond the official Operation Phantom mission. Something connected to Zakharov and biological weapons research that continued despite official cancellation. Something that her father had discovered and apparently denied trying to expose. Now Sarah was being sent to the heart of whatever conspiracy had claimed her father's life, with Reynolds as her commander. The man potentially responsible for William Mitchell's death would be directing his daughter's movements in hostile territory. The risk was obvious, but so was the opportunity. This mission might be her only chance to find concrete evidence of what had happened to her father, to discover who the facilitator was, to understand the full scope of the Osiris Protocol and why it warranted the murder of an elite Delta Force team. If Reynolds intended this assignment as a trap, he would discover that Sarah Mitchell was not so easily eliminated. She had spent years developing skills specifically for moments like this. Precision, patience, the ability to make the impossible shot when everything depended on it. "I'm coming, Dad," she whispered to the empty room. "I'll finish what you started, and I'll find out who really gave the order." Tomorrow's briefing would mark the beginning of the most dangerous mission of her career. Not just a military operation against a known threat, but a personal quest for truth in a landscape of lies. With enemies potentially on both sides, the targets she was being sent to eliminate, and the commander responsible for bringing her home alive. Sarah checked her equipment one final time, ensuring everything was ready for rapid deployment. Then she placed her father's old ballistic calculator, a gift from him years ago, in her gear bag. A reminder of his teachings, a connection to his legacy, and perhaps in some small way, a good luck charm for the mission that would either reveal the truth about his death or lead to her own. The military transport plane hummed steadily as it cut through night skies over the Black Sea. Inside the dimly lit cargo hold, Sarah Mitchell methodically checked her equipment for the fourth time since takeoff. Each item inspected, tested, and arranged with precise care. The ritual was as much psychological as practical, a way to maintain focus, to push aside the swirling questions and concentrate only on what she could control. 8 hours earlier, the mission briefing had confirmed everything Harrison had warned her about. Operation Ghost Echo, they were calling it, a direct reference to her father's call sign that couldn't possibly be coincidental. The target, Viktor Zakharov's compound in the remote Caucasus Mountains along the Russian-Georgian border. The objective: eliminate Zakharov, secure intelligence on the Osiris Protocol, and destroy any biological research materials. Captain Reynolds sat across from her, now reviewing tactical maps with Sergeant Marcus Davis, who had been assigned as Sarah's spotter for the operation. Davis, a stoic Air Force combat controller with multiple deployments to Afghanistan, had barely acknowledged Sarah when they were introduced. His body language screamed skepticism about serving under a female sniper. One more obstacle in a mission already fraught with complications. The team was small but elite. Besides Sarah Davis and Reynolds, there was Navy SEAL Lieutenant Jackson for close quarters battle, Army Rangers Wilson and Cooper for security and extraction, and CIA field operative Dr. Eleanor Weiss, an expert in biological weapons who would identify and secure research materials. 20 minutes to drop zone, the loadmaster announced over the intercom. Reynolds looked up from his maps. Final equipment check, comms test on tactical frequency. The team responded with practiced efficiency, confirming readiness testing radio communications, adjusting gear for the high-altitude parachute insertion that would place them 15 kilometers from Zakharov's compound. Throughout the preparations, Sarah noticed Reynolds watching her with an inscrutable expression, not the open hostility she had expected, but something more complex: calculation, assessment, perhaps even a grudging respect. Mitchell, Reynolds said, moving to sit beside her as the others completed their preparations. A word. Sarah maintained her neutral expression. Sir, this operation has personal significance for both of us. Reynolds said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Your father was a good man, one of the best operators I ever worked with. Sarah studied his face, looking for deception, for the tells that would reveal this as manipulation rather than genuine sentiment. You knew him well, she asked carefully. Well enough to respect him, well enough to understand what was lost when that helicopter went down. Reynolds paused. Whatever you might have heard about Operation Phantom, about disagreements between your father and me, it wasn't personal. It was about approach, about methodology. What methodology? Reynolds glanced around, ensuring the others were occupied before continuing. William believed in absolute transparency, following every protocol, reporting every finding up the chain of command. Admirable, but sometimes naive. In our line of work, certain information is too sensitive, too easily misinterpreted. Like information about biological weapons research continuing after official programs were terminated. A flicker of surprise crossed Reynolds' face, quickly concealed. You've done your homework. Yes, that was part of it. Your father discovered that Zakharov's research had continued with unofficial backing. He wanted to report it immediately to bring in oversight committees, congressional investigators. And you disagreed. I advocated for a more measured approach, securing the research, first determining its full scope, identifying all involved parties before making reports that could alert potential conspirators. Sarah absorbed this information, comparing it with what Harrison had told her, with the materials copied from Reynolds' office. There was truth here, but partial truth, carefully framed to paint Reynolds in the most favorable light. That disagreement led to my father's death. She said, not a question, but a statement. Reynolds' expression hardened. The helicopter was shot down by local insurgents with Russian-supplied anti-aircraft weapons. A tragedy, not a conspiracy. And yet here we are, years later, targeting the same man, the same research program. Because the threat remains. Reynolds lowered his voice further. Zakharov found new backers, powerful people who believe his work has applications beyond what most would consider ethical. The Osiris Protocol isn't just about weapons development. It's about reshaping the fundamental balance of power. Before Sarah could press further, the aircraft's red warning lights flashed, signaling 5 minutes to the drop zone. Reynolds stood, ending their conversation with practiced timing that seemed almost too convenient. Mask up, he ordered the team. We jump on my mark. Sarah secured her oxygen mask as the cargo ramp began to lower, revealing the black emptiness of night. Below, the rugged Caucasus Mountains waited, moonlight silvering their peaks through scattered clouds. She positioned herself in the jump formation, mind still processing Reynolds' careful revelations and equally careful omissions. Whether Reynolds was telling the truth about her father's death or constructing an elaborate deception, one thing was certain: this mission represented her best opportunity to discover what had really happened to William Mitchell, to understand the full scope of the conspiracy surrounding the Osiris Protocol, and to determine Reynolds' true identity in all of it. The jump light turned green. Execute, Reynolds commanded, and they stepped into the void. The free fall was momentary sensory isolation when, roaring past her helmet body automatically, assuming the proper position, altimeter, tracking the rapid descent. Sarah found clarity in the controlled fall and the precise timing required for a high-altitude, low-opening jump. At exactly the right moment, she deployed her parachute, feeling the expected jolt as the canopy caught air and her descent slowed dramatically. Under canopy, Sarah navigated toward the designated landing zone, a small clearing in the dense forest approximately 15 kilometers from Zakharov's compound. The team landed within 90 seconds of each other, quickly securing parachutes and assembling their equipment. Reynolds established a security perimeter before gathering the team for final instructions. We moved to observation point Alpha before dawn, he said, indicating a ridgeline on their tactical map. Establish surveillance of the compound, confirm target presence, and identify security patterns. Mitchell and Davis will set up sniper position for overwatch during infiltration. Sarah noted that Reynolds' operational plan matched standard protocols. Nothing suspicious. Nothing that suggested ulterior motives. If he intended to betray the team, as he might have betrayed her father, there was no indication in the tactical approach. They moved through the night with practiced stealth, navigating the difficult mountain terrain using night vision and satellite imagery. Sarah's extensive experience in Afghanistan's similar topography served her well, allowing her to move confidently despite the challenging conditions. By 0400 hours, they had reached Observation Point Alpha, a rocky outcropping that provided excellent sightlines to Zakharov's compound nearly 2 kilometers away. Sarah and Davis immediately began setting up their sniper position, while the others established a concealed forward operating base. "I'll establish meteorological readings," Davis said, as they unpacked the equipment. It was the most he had spoken directly to Sarah since the mission began. Wind is variable in these mountain valleys. Temperature differential between ridge and valley will affect ballistics significantly. Sarah nodded, assembling her rifle, a Chaytak M200 intervention chambered for 408 rounds, capable of effective shots beyond 2 kilometers in the right conditions. "I've already input preliminary environmental data," she replied, showing him the ballistic calculator. "We'll need regular updates as conditions change, especially around dawn when thermal patterns shift." Davis looked surprised at her thoroughness. "That's unusually comprehensive data modeling. I like to be prepared." Sarah positioned the rifle, beginning the process of establishing firing solutions for various potential engagement points around the compound. "My father taught me that environmental mathematics matter more than raw shooting skill at extreme distances." "Your father," Davis repeated, a note of recognition in his voice. "You're Ghost Six's daughter. I heard rumors, but I didn't make the connection until now." Sarah continued her preparations, keeping her expression neutral. "Does that change anything about this operation?" Davis seemed to consider the question carefully. "I served with men who worked with your father. They said he was the best tactical thinker in Delta. Said he could see 3 moves ahead in any operation." "And what do they say about how he died?" The question hung in the air between them. Davis adjusted his spotting scope, taking time before answering. "Officially, insurgent action. Unofficially, there are questions. Men like your father don't die easily, and operations like Phantom don't disappear from the record unless someone wants them forgotten." It was more than Sarah had expected, an acknowledgement of the inconsistencies surrounding her father's death, and an implicit suggestion that Davis might not be as firmly in Reynolds' camp as she had initially assumed. "And Captain Reynolds," she asked, "what do they say about him?" Davis's expression became carefully neutral. "Effective operator, good tactical mind. But rumors about Operation Phantom follow him too. Some say he was lucky to be evacuated before the helicopter incident. Others wonder if luck had nothing to do with it." Before Sarah could pursue this further, Reynolds approached their position. "Initial surveillance confirms at least 12 security personnel on rotating patrols," he reported. "2 main buildings, multiple outbuildings. Satellite thermal imaging suggests the laboratory is in the basement of the primary structure." He spread a detailed map of the compound between them. "Mitchell, I need firing solutions on these guard positions. Davis, coordinate with Wilson to establish secondary observation points here and here. We move at dusk tomorrow after confirming Zakharov's presence." The assignments were tactically sound, distributing the team in optimal positions for the planned operation. Still, Sarah noticed that Reynolds was effectively separating her from Davis, just as their conversation had begun touching on sensitive topics. "Understood," she replied professionally. Reynolds lingered a moment longer than necessary. "Good work on the navigation, Mitchell. Your father would have been proud of your fieldcraft." The comment struck Sarah as calculated, another attempt to establish a connection, to position himself as someone who had respected William Mitchell rather than potentially betrayed him. But it also revealed something important. Reynolds was concerned about her suspicions about what she might have learned regarding Operation Phantom. He was watching her closely, gauging her reactions, perhaps assessing how much she knew. Throughout the day, Sarah maintained her professional focus, establishing precise firing solutions for every potential engagement point, tracking security patrols, documenting patterns. Davis, despite his initial skepticism, proved to be a competent spotter, providing accurate environmental readings and maintaining security while Sarah worked. By late afternoon, they had comprehensive intelligence on the compound's security measures. 12 guards on rotating shifts, electronic surveillance covering the main approaches, a helicopter pad with no aircraft currently present, regular supplied deliveries by truck along the single-access road. Movement at the main entrance, Davis reported suddenly peering through his high-powered spotting scope. Black SUV arriving, 4 security personnel, and a civilian. Sarah shifted her rifle, bringing the scene into focus through her scope. The civilian was tall and thin, with the scholarly bearing she recognized from the photograph Harrison had shown her. Target confirmed, she said calmly. Zakharov just arrived. Reynolds joined them at the observation post, examining the scene through his own optics. Positive identification, he agreed. Dr. Weiss confirms facial recognition match with intelligence photos. Sarah continued observing as Zakharov entered the main building, noting details about his security detail, their weapons, their level of alertness. He appears comfortable, not concerned about potential threats, she analyzed. Security is professional, but not on heightened alert. Reynolds nodded. Good news for our infiltration. We proceed as planned at dusk tomorrow. Mitchell, you'll eliminate the perimeter guards at these positions simultaneously with our approach. Once we're inside, you'll maintain overwatch and prevent any reinforcements from entering the compound. And Zakharov, Sarah asked. Primary target, but we need him alive initially. Dr. Weiss requires access to his research data security protocols for the laboratory. Once we have what we need, elimination is authorized. The plan was standard special operations procedure for high-value target extraction. Nothing in Reynolds' approach suggested deviation from mission parameters. If he had ulterior motives, they remained perfectly concealed beneath textbook tactical planning. As night fell and the team rotated through watch schedules, Sarah found a moment to contact Harrison via secure satellite communication. The connection was brief, encrypted, designed to avoid detection. Package located, she reported using their predetermined code. Delivery proceeding according to schedule. Understood, Harrison replied, his voice distorted by encryption. Be advised, additional information obtained on the facilitator. Forwarding data packet to your secure device. The transmission ended before Sarah could request clarification. Minutes later, her secure tablet indicated an incoming encrypted file. She accessed it in the privacy of her small tent, carefully shielding the screen from potential observation. The file contained intelligence reports, surveillance photos, and communication intercepts. At the center was information about an individual identified only as the facilitator, apparently a high-ranking American intelligence official who had maintained unauthorized contact with Zakharov for years, providing funding and protection for the Osiris research program. Sarah scrolled through the documents, searching for a name, a face, something that would identify this mysterious figure. Near the end of the file, she found a partially redacted memo referencing a meeting between Zakharov and the facilitator in Istanbul in 2002, just months before Operation Phantom. A surveillance photo accompanied the memo showing Zakharov entering a hotel, and beside him, face partially obscured but still recognizable, General Robert Morrison. Sarah stared at the image, processing the implications. Morrison, the same general who had praised her at Fort Carson, who had recommended her for the instructor position at Fort Bragg, who had specifically requested her for this mission. The man who had apparently been secretly supporting Zakharov's research program, even as he authorized Operation Phantom to eliminate it. If Morrison was the facilitator, it changed everything. It meant her father had likely discovered Morrison's involvement with Zakharov, had threatened to expose it, and had been eliminated as a result. It meant Reynolds might indeed have been complicit in William Mitchell's death following Morrison's orders. And it meant this current mission might be not about eliminating Zakharov and stopping the Osiris protocol, but about protecting Morrison by destroying evidence of his involvement. But why involve Sarah? Why specifically request her for this mission if the goal was to cover up Morrison's connection to Zakharov? Unless the mission had a secondary objective, eliminating William Mitchell's daughter before she discovered the truth, completing the cleanup operation that had begun with her father's death. Sarah closed the file, erasing all traces of it from her device. The mission had just become infinitely more complex. Reynolds might be an enemy, a conspirator in her father's death, or he might be a pawn following Morrison's orders without understanding the general's true connection to Zakharov. Either way, Sarah could trust no one on this team except possibly Davis, who had at least acknowledged the questions surrounding Operation Phantom. She needed more information, more evidence. and the best source of that evidence was now less than 2 kilometers away in Zakharov's compound. The next day passed in meticulous preparation. Equipment checks, rehearsal of infiltration routes, contingency planning. Sarah maintained her professional demeanor throughout, giving no indication that she had discovered Morrison's probable identity as the facilitator. Reynolds finalized the operational timeline: infiltration beginning at dusk, Sarah eliminating key perimeter guards to create an entry corridor, the assault team breaching the main building, Dr. Weiss accessing the laboratory with Reynolds, while Wilson, Cooper, and Jackson secured the compound. Questions Reynolds asked after the final briefing. Extraction protocol if the operation is compromised, Sarah asked, thinking of contingencies. Primary extraction point remains the clearing where we landed. If compromised, secondary extraction at these coordinates. Reynolds indicated a location on their tactical map. Helicopter on standby, 30-minute response time once called. Standard procedure, nothing suspicious. But Sarah now viewed every aspect of the operation through the lens of potential betrayal. Would the extraction helicopter arrive if called, or would it be conveniently delayed as had happened with her father's team? As dusk approached, the team made final preparations. Sarah and Davis moved to their designated overwatch position, establishing a stable shooting platform with clear sight lines to the compound's perimeter guard positions. The Chaytak rifle was zeroed, loaded with match-grade ammunition, ballistic calculator, updated with current environmental data. Wind shifting from the east 6 knots, Davis reported. Temperature dropping more rapidly than predicted. Humidity at 62%. Sarah adjusted her calculations accordingly. Updraft from the valley creating vertical displacement, compensating. Davis watched her work with increasing respect. You really can calculate all those variables simultaneously. My father taught me that a bullet's path is pure mathematics. Remove emotion, remove doubt, solve the equation. Sarah completed her adjustments. Ready on all targets. The assault team moved into position at the edge of the forest surrounding the compound. Twilight deepened into darkness. Night vision systems activated, showing the green-tinged landscape in artificial clarity. Overwatch in position, Sarah reported over the secure communications channel. All targets acquired. Assault team ready, Reynolds confirmed. Execute on my mark. 3, 2, 1, execute. Sarah controlled her breathing, finding that perfect stillness her father had taught her. First shot guard tower, northeastern corner. Second shot perimeter patrol, western approach. Third shot security station, main gate. Each target acquired, each shot calculated, each round delivered with surgical precision. 3 guards down within 2 seconds, creating the entry corridor for the assault team. Guards neutralized, she reported calmly. Assault corridor clear. Reynolds led the team forward, moving swiftly across the open ground to the compound perimeter. They breached the fence at the predetermined point, advancing toward the main building with practiced coordination. Sarah tracked their progress through her scope, eliminating 2 additional guards who emerged from the barracks building before they could raise the alarm. Approaching main building, Reynolds reported, preparing to breach. Sarah watched as the team positioned themselves at the entrance. Standard breach protocol, flashbang entry room clearing. She shifted her attention to potential threat areas, ensuring no reinforcements could approach undetected. Movement at the secondary structure, Davis warned. Armed personnel moving toward the main building. Sarah acquired the new targets, 3 security guards responding to the silent intrusion approaching from the smaller outbuilding, approximately 50 meters from the main structure. 3 hostiles approaching from the west, she reported, engaging. 3 more shots, 3 more perfect hits. The responding guards eliminated before they could reach the assault team. Inside the main building, Reynolds' team moved efficiently through the structure, clearing rooms, securing zones, working their way toward the laboratory entrance in the basement level. Sarah monitored their progress through periodic status updates over the comm system. First floor clear. Moving to basement level. Laboratory entrance located. Breaching laboratory. Everything proceeded according to plan, almost too perfectly. Sarah maintained her vigilance, watching for any sign that this operation was something other than it appeared. Mitchell, Reynolds' voice came over the comm suddenly. We've secured Zakharov and accessed the laboratory. Dr. Weiss is downloading research data, but we have a complication. Nature of complication, Sarah asked, instantly alert. Additional research facility discovered. Separate building, concealed entrance on the eastern perimeter. Zakharov indicates critical materials stored there. We need eyes on that location. Sarah and Davis consulted their tactical map. The eastern perimeter had a small outbuilding that appeared to be a storage shed on their reconnaissance imagery. "I have visual on the structure," Sarah confirmed, shifting her rifle. "No obvious security presence." "We're sending Wilson and Cooper to investigate," Reynolds said. "Maintain overwatch. Zakharov claims additional security may be present, possibly automated systems." Sarah tracked the two operators as they moved cautiously toward the storage building. Something about the situation felt wrong. A deviation from the planned operation, a sudden change based solely on Zakharov's information. Was it a legitimate development, or was Reynolds creating a distraction, separating the team for some purpose related to his true objectives? Wilson and Cooper approaching target structure. Sarah reported, keeping her tone professional despite her growing suspicion. She watched through her scope as the two operators reached the small building, checked for surveillance systems, and prepared to breach the door. Standard procedure executed flawlessly. Then movement caught her attention, a figure emerging from shadows near the main building, moving purposefully toward the laboratory entrance. Not one of their team members, not one of the compound security personnel she had been tracking. "Unknown individual approaching main building," Sarah reported urgently. "Armed tactical gear moving with purpose." "Identify," Reynolds ordered. Sarah focused her scope on the figure. The face became clear in her night vision optics. Recognition hit like a physical blow. "It's Morrison," she said, momentary shock breaking through her professional demeanor. "General Morrison is on site." Silence on the comm channel, 3 seconds that felt like eternity. "Confirmed," Reynolds finally responded, his tone changed harder. "Mitchell, maintain your position. Do not engage." Sarah's mind raced. Morrison here in person at Zakharov's compound, not coordinating from a command center thousands of miles away, as he had supposedly been doing. Here on the ground, entering the facility just as the team secured Zakharov and his research. The implications were unmistakable. Morrison was indeed the facilitator. His presence confirmed everything Harrison's intelligence had suggested. This wasn't a mission to eliminate Zakharov and end the Osiris Protocol. It was something else entirely. "Davis," Sarah said quietly, not transmitting. "Did you know Morrison would be on site?" Davis looked genuinely shocked. "No, this isn't in any briefing I received." "I need to move to a different position," Sarah decided. "Maintain comms, inform me of any developments." "That's against protocol," Davis objected. "Reynolds ordered us to hold position." "I know." Sarah was already gathering essential equipment. "But my father taught me another lesson. When the operation changes, fundamentally adapt or die." Sarah moved silently through the darkened forest, circling to approach the compound from a different angle. Her instincts screamed warning. If Morrison was the facilitator, if he had orchestrated her father's death to protect his connection to Zakharov and the Osiris Protocol, then this entire mission was compromised. She established a new observation position with sight lines to both the main building entrance and the smaller structure Wilson and Cooper were investigating. Through her scope, she watched Morrison enter the main building, presumably heading toward the laboratory where Reynolds and Dr. Weiss had secured Zakharov. "Status update," Reynolds' voice came over the comm. "Laboratory secure. Dr. Weiss accessing critical data. Wilson and Cooper report secondary facility contains biological specimens. Preparing for controlled destruction." Standard operational language. Nothing to indicate the mission had fundamentally changed with Morrison's arrival. But Sarah no longer trusted any of it. She switched to a private channel with Davis. "Any visual on Morrison inside the main building?" "Negative," Davis replied, sounding tense. "But thermal imaging shows 4 heat signatures in the laboratory area. Reynolds, Weiss, Zakharov, and presumably Morrison." "And Jackson?" "Maintaining security at the main entrance. Wilson and Cooper still at the secondary structure." The team was now spread thin, separated into small groups across the compound. Exactly the kind of vulnerability a tactical commander would normally avoid, unless division was the objective. Sarah made her decision. She would approach the main building and attempt to observe the laboratory, directly determine what was really happening between Reynolds, Morrison, and Zakharov. It meant abandoning her overwatch position, potentially compromising the operation. But if her suspicions were correct, the operation was already compromised from within. Moving with the stealth techniques perfected in Afghanistan's mountains, Sarah approached the main building from its blind side, away from Jackson's position at the entrance. A basement window offered potential access to the laboratory level. She verified no security systems, then carefully removed the glass, creating an entry point just large enough to slip through. Inside the building was clinical, sterile, a research facility designed for biological containment. Sarah moved silently through darkened corridors following the building schematic they had reviewed during mission planning. The laboratory should be at the end of the main hallway behind reinforced doors. As she approached, voices became audible. She slowed, positioning herself where she could observe without being seen, weapon ready but not raised. The laboratory doors stood partially open. Inside, she could see Reynolds, Dr. Weiss, Zakharov, and Morrison. Not in confrontation as she had expected, but in what appeared to be a collegial discussion. Reynolds and Morrison stood close together, examining documents Zakharov had spread across a laboratory table. Dr. Weiss worked at a computer terminal, downloading data. "The modification to the delivery system is brilliant," Morrison was saying, examining technical diagrams, "completely undetectable until activation." "The beauty is in its specificity," Zakharov replied, his accent thick but his English precise. "Target selection at the genetic level. A weapon that can eliminate specific demographics while leaving infrastructure and desired populations intact." "And the timeline for full production?" Reynolds asked. 6 months with proper funding and facility security," Zakharov answered. "The prototype is functional but limited in scope. Full-scale implementation requires additional resources." "Resources you'll have," Morrison assured him. "The Istanbul facility is already being prepared. Your research team will be transferred within the week." Sarah felt cold certainty settle over her. This wasn't an operation to stop Zakharov. It was an extraction. Morrison and Reynolds weren't eliminating the Osiris protocol, they were securing it, transferring it to a new location under their direct control. And her father had discovered this conspiracy years earlier, had threatened to expose it, and had died as a result. Sarah considered her options. She could confront them directly, but would be outnumbered and outgunned. She could retreat, report what she had discovered to Harrison, potentially expose the conspiracy through official channels. Or she could complete her father's mission, eliminate Zakharov, destroy his research, and gather evidence of Morrison and Reynolds' involvement. Before she could decide, Dr. Weiss spoke. "Transfer complete, all research data secured." "Excellent," Morrison replied. "Prepare the samples for transport. The helicopter will be here in 20 minutes. "And the rest of the team?" Reynolds asked. Morrison's expression hardened. "Standard protocol. No witnesses, no loose ends." "Wilson and Cooper are still at the secondary facility," Reynolds noted. "Jackson at the entrance. And Mitchell, still at her overwatch position with Davis," Morrison said. "Once the charges are set, they'll have no warning. Clean, simultaneous elimination of all potential complications." "Like father, like daughter," Reynolds commented, his tone chillingly casual. "William Mitchell discovered too much about Osiris. We couldn't risk exposure then, and we certainly can't now." The confirmation of her father's murder, spoken so callously, sent a surge of cold rage through Sarah. Her suspicions confirmed in the worst possible way. Morrison and Reynolds had killed her father to protect their biological weapons program. Now they planned to eliminate her and the rest of the team with the same clinical efficiency. She had to act, not just for justice for her father, but to prevent the deaths of her teammates, to stop Osiris from becoming an operational weapons program under Morrison's control. Sarah retreated silently from her observation position, moving back toward the window she had entered through. Once outside, she activated her comm on a direct channel to Davis. "Mission compromised," she said without preamble. "Morrison and Reynolds are working with Zakharov. They're planning to eliminate the entire team. Charges set somewhere in the compound." Davis' response was immediate, professional. "Understood. Alerting Wilson and Cooper now. Get them clear of the secondary structure, likely rigged to explode. And you?" "I'm going to stop the extraction. Helicopter arriving in approximately 15 minutes. I need to reach Jackson, warn him." Sarah moved swiftly around the perimeter of the main building, staying in shadows, avoiding security cameras and potential observation points. She reached Jackson's position at the main entrance, finding the SEAL maintaining vigilant watch, unaware of the betrayal unfolding inside. "Lieutenant," she said softly, approaching from his periphery to avoid startling him into a defensive reaction. Jackson turned, surprised but maintaining discipline. "Mitchell, you should be at Overwatch." Mission compromised. Reynolds and Morrison are working with Zakharov. They're planning to eliminate the entire team once their helicopter arrives. To his credit, Jackson processed this information without wasting time on disbelief or questions. Extraction plan. Davis is warning Wilson and Cooper. We need to secure transport, get clear before Morrison realizes we know. There's a vehicle depot on the north side of the compound, Jackson said. 2 SUVs possibly fueled and operational. Get there, secure transport, Sarah instructed. I need to deal with Morrison and Reynolds before they transfer Zakharov and his research. Jackson assessed her for a moment, then nodded. You're going in alone against 3 armed hostiles. 4 counting Dr. Weiss, but I have the element of surprise. High-risk operation, Jackson observed. My specialty, Sarah replied. Go. Be ready to extract in 10 minutes. As Jackson moved toward the vehicle depot, Sarah circled back to her original entry point. The laboratory confrontation would be high risk, but she had one critical advantage. None of them knew she had discovered their betrayal. They believed she was still at her overwatch position with Davis's, waiting for the explosive charges to eliminate her. She entered the building again, moving with increased urgency, but maintaining stealth. The corridor to the laboratory remained clear. Inside, she could hear Morrison giving instructions. Secure the samples in the transport containers. Reynolds, verify the charges at the secondary facility. 2-minute timer once activated. Sarah positioned herself at the laboratory entrance, weapon ready, and made her decision. Direct confrontation, no stealth, pure tactical surprise. She stepped into the doorway, rifle raised. Nobody move. The 4 occupants froze, turning toward her with expressions ranging from shock to calculation. Mitchell, Reynolds recovered first. What are you doing here? You were ordered to maintain overwatch. Orders changed when I discovered you're working with Zakharov, not eliminating him. Sarah kept her rifle trained on the group, positioning herself to cover all potential threats. When I heard you and Morrison discussing how you murdered my father to protect Osiris, Morrison's expression shifted from surprise to cold assessment. You've misunderstood the situation, Sergeant. This is a complex intelligence operation with compartmentalized objectives. Save it, General. I heard everything. The extraction plan, the charges set to eliminate witnesses, the transfer of Zakharov's research to Istanbul. Reynolds moved slightly, positioning himself between Sarah and Morrison. Think about what you're doing, Mitchell. You're one shooter against 4 of us. Even with your skills, those aren't favorable odds. True, Sarah acknowledged, but I only need 1 shot to eliminate Zakharov and end Osiris permanently. 1 shot to complete the mission my father died trying to accomplish. She shifted her aim, slightly centering on Zakharov, who had remained silent, watching the confrontation with clinical detachment. The research is already secured. Dr. Weiss spoke for the first time, gesturing towards sealed transport containers. Eliminating Zakharov won't stop Osiris. The protocol will continue under new management. Not if I destroy the research along with its creator, Sarah replied. Not if I expose Morrison's involvement, his murder of American Special Operations personnel to protect an illegal biological weapons program. Morrison laughed, the sound cold and dismissive. Exposed to whom, with what evidence? Even if you survive this confrontation, it's your word against a 3-star general's. The operation will be classified, records sealed, your accusations dismissed as stress-induced paranoia. Unless I've been recording this entire conversation, Sarah said. Unless every word you've spoken is being transmitted to secure servers beyond your reach. It was a bluff, but a calculated one. Morrison couldn't know for certain whether she was recording, whether evidence was already beyond his control. The general's expression hardened. Reynolds, deal with this situation. Now. Reynolds moved, hand dropping to his sidearm. Sarah had anticipated this, had been watching for precisely this moment. She fired once the sound deafening in the confined laboratory space. Reynolds dropped a precision shot to his shoulder, incapacitating him without killing. Next one isn't non-lethal, Sarah warned, swinging her rifle back toward Morrison and Zakharov. On the floor, hands visible. Morrison remained standing, calculating odds options. You won't shoot a superior officer, Mitchell. Your entire life has been defined by military discipline, by following the chain of command. My entire life has been defined by seeking justice for my father, Sarah corrected. by developing the skills necessary to complete his final mission. Hands on the floor, General. Last warning. For a moment, the outcome hung in balance. Then Morrison made his decision, moving not to comply but to draw his own weapon. Sarah fired again, another precision shot, incapacitating without killing. The general fell, clutching his leg where the bullet had struck. Dr. Weiss raised her hands immediately. I'm a scientist, not a combatant. I was following orders. Zakharov alone seemed unperturbed by the violent confrontation. Impressive marksmanship, Ms. Mitchell. Your father would be proud. He, too, had remarkable accuracy under pressure. You knew my father? Of course. William Mitchell tracked me across 3 countries before locating my previous research facility. A worthy adversary. His elimination was regrettable but necessary for the continuation of Osiris. Sarah kept her rifle trained on him. The continuation of a biological weapons program designed to target specific genetic demographics. A violation of every international treaty, every ethical principle. A tool for reshaping geopolitical reality, Zakharov corrected. Power without destruction, influence without conventional warfare. Genocide made scientific, Sarah countered, and you'll answer for it. All of you will. The distant sound of helicopter rotors became audible. The extraction Morrison had arranged arriving on schedule. That would be our transport, Zakharov observed. Your time is running short, Ms. Mitchell. Whatever you plan to do, it must be done quickly. Sarah activated her comm. Davis status. Wilson and Cooper clear of the secondary facility. Explosives located and disarmed. Jackson has secured transport at the vehicle depot. And the approaching helicopter. Not ours, presumed hostile. Sarah made her decision. Secure the research containers. All of them. Meet at the vehicle depot in 5 minutes. She turned her attention back to the laboratory occupants. Morrison and Reynolds incapacitated but conscious. Dr. Weiss compliant. Zakharov observant, calculating. You're coming with us, she told Zakharov. You'll provide testimony about Morrison's involvement, about Reynolds' role in my father's death. A risky strategy, Zakharov noted. My cooperation is not guaranteed. I'm not asking for your cooperation, Sarah replied. I'm securing evidence. Whether you provide testimony willingly or under interrogation is your choice. She bound Morrison and Reynolds with zip ties, ensuring their wounds were incapacitating but not life-threatening. Justice would require them to stand trial to face the consequences of their actions legally rather than dying here in Zakharov's laboratory. The helicopter will have security personnel, Dr. Weiss warned. Morrison's private contractors, not regular military. More complications, Sarah acknowledged. She activated her comm again. Jackson, we need a diversion. Approaching helicopter needs to focus away from the vehicle depot. Already on it, the SEAL replied. Remote charges set at the secondary facility. On your signal. Sarah secured Zakharov and Dr. Weiss, collecting the research containers that contained the Osiris protocol data and biological samples. Everything needed to expose the conspiracy, to prove Morrison and Reynolds' betrayal, to justify the non-standard actions she had taken during the operation. You won't succeed, Morrison said through gritted teeth. This is bigger than you understand. Powerful people are invested in Osiris, people who won't allow exposure. Perhaps, Sarah conceded, but my father believes some principles are worth any risk, worth dying for if necessary. I share that belief. The helicopter was close now, its searchlight sweeping the compound perimeter as it approached the designated landing zone near the main building. Time to go, Sarah told her prisoners. Move. They proceeded through the facility toward the exit, Sarah maintaining tactical awareness despite the complications of managing 2 prisoners while carrying critical evidence. At the entrance, she verified Jackson's position at the vehicle depot, confirmed Davis, Wilson, and Cooper were converging on the same location. Jackson execute diversion. Moments later, explosions rocked the secondary facility, creating exactly the distraction they needed. The helicopter diverted toward the explosion's searchlight, focusing on the growing flames, attention drawn away from the vehicle depot on the opposite side of the compound. Sarah moved her prisoners quickly across the compound, using the confusion of the explosion and the darkness to reach the depot undetected. Jackson had indeed secured transportation, 2 black SUVs engines running ready for immediate departure. Wilson, Cooper, secure the prisoners in the second vehicle, Sarah ordered as they arrived. Davis with me in this lead vehicle. Jackson rear security. They loaded the research containers, positioned the prisoners, established a rapid evacuation plan. As they prepared to depart, Sarah took one final look at the compound where her father's last mission had begun years earlier. The helicopter was landing near the burning secondary facility, security personnel deploying to investigate the explosion. Soon they would discover Morrison and Reynolds missing, would realize what had happened. Primary extraction point compromised, Sarah decided. We'll use the secondary location call for official military extraction once we're clear. And if official channels are compromised too, Davis asked. If Morrison has influence over the extraction teams, then we adapt, Sarah replied. We find another way. We complete the mission. They drove away from the compound, using mountain roads to evade potential pursuit, maintaining communication discipline in case their frequencies were being monitored. Sarah directed the convoy with the precision and confidence that had defined her military career, navigating the unfamiliar terrain based on satellite imagery studied during mission preparation. In the SUV's confined space, Zakharov watched her with clinical interest. You are remarkably like your father, Ms. Mitchell. The same intensity, the same unwavering focus. He too believed he could change the course of history through sheer determination. Sarah kept her attention on the road on the mission. The difference is that I know what happened to him. I know who was responsible, and I have the evidence to prove it. Evidence is only valuable if you live to present it, Zakharov observed. Morrison's resources extend far beyond this mountainside. The next 24 hours will determine whether your justice is achieved or whether Osiris continues under new direction. Then I'll make every hour count, Sarah replied. They reached the secondary extraction point shortly before dawn, a mountain plateau large enough for helicopter landing, defensible with clear sight lines in all directions. Sarah established a security perimeter, positioning Wilson and Cooper to watch for ground pursuit, while Jackson maintained overwatch on their prisoners. Using secure satellite communication, Sarah contacted Harrison, directly bypassing standard command channels that might be compromised by Morrison's influence. Sundown actual, she transmitted, using their predetermined authentication code. Operation status critical, primary objective achieved, but mission parameters compromised. Requesting direct extraction security protocols Alpha 3. Harrison's response came immediately. Authentication confirmed. Extraction team deploying ETA 3 hours. Secure all evidence. Trust no other communications. Sarah turned to Davis, who had monitored the exchange. 3 hours. We hold this position, maintain the security, prepare for extraction. And after extraction, Davis asked, Morrison has connections throughout military intelligence. His reach is extensive. We go directly to the highest levels, Sarah decided. Joint Chiefs, Secretary of Defense Intelligence Oversight Committees. With Zakharov in custody, with the research of materials secured, with Morrison and Reynolds detained, the evidence will be impossible to dismiss. As the sun rose over the Caucasus Mountains, Sarah took position at the extraction point's highest vantage, rifle ready, watching for any sign of pursuit or threat. The mission that had begun as a standard operation against a known enemy had transformed into something far more complex, a fight against corruption within her own chain of command, a quest for justice that transcended military objectives. Her father's final mission completed at last. 3 hours later, the extraction helicopter appeared on the horizon. Sarah verified its identification markers, confirmed the authentication codes, ensured it was indeed Harrison's team rather than Morrison's assets. As the helicopter landed and the extraction team deployed to secure the prisoners and evidence, Sarah felt a weight lifting, not completely removed, but shifted. Justice would not be immediate. The conspiracy surrounding Osiris would not unravel easily. Morrison's influence would not be neutralized without resistance. But she had completed what William Mitchell had started, had secured the evidence her father had died trying to obtain, had ensured that those responsible would face consequences for their actions. Harrison approached as the prisoners were loaded onto the helicopter. Well done, Sergeant Mitchell. Your father would be proud. Sarah nodded, accepting the sentiment without responding directly. The evidence is secure. Multiple copies, multiple secure locations, Harrison confirmed. Too widespread to be contained now. The Joint Chiefs have been briefed preliminarily. Investigation already authorized at the highest levels. Morrison will have contingencies allies in position to limit exposure. Undoubtedly, Harrison agreed, but he's wounded literally and figuratively. His direct involvement, his presence at Zakharov's compound, that's not something easily explained away. Sarah looked toward the helicopter where Reynolds sat under guard, his expression a mixture of resignation and calculation. And Reynolds, facing multiple charges, conspiracy, treason, murder. His cooperation could be valuable in exposing the full scope of Osiris and its backers. He was there when my father died, Sarah said. He knew what would happen to that helicopter. Harrison placed a hand on her shoulder. And he'll answer for it through proper legal channels. Your father believed in justice through legitimate systems, even when those systems were flawed. He would want this handled lawfully. Sarah knew Harrison was right. William Mitchell had been a warrior, but one who operated within ethical boundaries, who believed in the principles he defended. Executing Reynolds or Morrison outside legal procedures would betray those principles, would undermine the very justice she sought. Time to go home, Sarah, Harrison said gently. Time to finish this the right way. She boarded the helicopter, taking a seat where she could observe the prisoners while maintaining tactical awareness of their surroundings. As the aircraft lifted off, she looked back at the mountains where her father's last mission had ended in betrayal and death. Goodbye, Dad, she whispered too softly for anyone else to hear. Mission complete. 10 years later, Master Sergeant Sarah Mitchell stood at the firing range at Fort Carson, watching a new generation of recruits prepare for qualification. Her auburn hair now had strands of silver at the temples, and the calm green eyes had seen more of the world's darkness than most would experience in a lifetime. But she remained the best shooter in any room she entered, the standard by which others measured themselves. The Morrison-Reynolds conspiracy had been exposed, though not without resistance and not without cost. Morrison had connections at the highest levels of government and intelligence communities. Evidence had mysteriously disappeared. Witnesses had become suddenly unavailable. But enough had remained, enough testimony had been secured, enough brave individuals had come forward to ensure at least partial justice. Morrison, stripped of rank and honors, had died in federal prison 3 years into his sentence. Reynolds had cooperated, providing testimony that implicated dozens of others involved in the Osiris Protocol, receiving a reduced sentence in exchange for his cooperation. Zakharov remained in a specialized detention facility, his knowledge too dangerous to release, his crimes too severe to forgive. The official record now acknowledged William Mitchell's death as occurring during an operation to prevent illegal biological weapons research, not a helicopter accident. His name had been added to memorial walls, his service recognized with posthumous honors. Small consolation for years of concealed truth, but validation of what Sarah had always known. Her father had died trying to protect others, trying to expose a conspiracy that violated everything he had sworn to defend. Master Sergeant Mitchell, Sarah turned to find a young female lieutenant approaching, clipboard in hand. Yes, Lieutenant. The new sniper qualification course is ready for your review. The adaptations you recommended have been implemented. Sarah nodded. Let's see it. They walked together along the range, discussing technical specifications, environmental variables, qualification standards. The Mitchell method, now officially adopted throughout military sniper training, emphasizing scientific precision and environmental mathematics over physical attributes, allowing a broader range of candidates to excel based on skill rather than age or strength. One more thing, Master Sergeant, the lieutenant said as they completed their review. There's someone here to see you. Says you trained him years ago. Sarah followed the lieutenant's gesture toward a figure standing near the range office. As they approached, she recognized him immediately despite the passing years. Cooper, she said with genuine surprise. It's been a while. The former recruit, now a senior non-commissioned officer himself, smiled and offered a respectful salute. Master Sergeant Mitchell, I hoped I might find you here. What brings you back to Carson? Taking command of the Advanced Marksmanship program next month, Cooper replied. Thought I should consult with the best instructor the program ever had. Sarah accepted the compliment with a slight nod. I hear you've made quite a reputation yourself. Top scores at Fort Bragg, distinguished service in multiple theaters. All building on foundations you established, Cooper said. That day on this range when General de Morrison told us who you really were, it changed everything for me. Changed how I thought about capability, about what determines excellence. Sarah remembered that day clearly, the mocking recruits, the demonstration, Morrison's unexpected appearance. The beginning of a journey that had ultimately led to justice for her father, to fundamental changes in military training, philosophy, to her current role, shaping the next generation of precision marksmen. I have a new group starting qualification tomorrow, Cooper continued. Young recruits, some with traditional backgrounds, some from less conventional paths. Would be an honor if you'd address them. Share some of your experience. I'd be happy to, Sarah agreed. The following morning, she stood before Cooper's recruits, a diverse group that would have been unimaginable in military sniper programs when she began her career. Men and women of various backgrounds, sizes, physical attributes. All selected not based on preconceived notions of what a sniper should look like, but on demonstrated aptitude, on potential, on the qualities that actually determine success in precision marksmanship. My father taught me that a rifle doesn't care who's pulling the trigger. She began echoing the lesson William Mitchell had shared with her on a Colorado hillside decades earlier. It doesn't know your gender, your background. It responds only to proper fundamentals, to discipline, to understanding the mathematics and physics that govern a bullet's path through space. She moved to the firing line, picking up an M24 sniper rifle, the same model that had started everything on this range years ago. Today, I'm going to demonstrate what's possible when you master those fundamentals. When you refuse to accept limitations others try to impose based on how you look, who they think you should be, what they believe you can accomplish. Sarah settled behind the rifle, finding that perfect stillness, that complete focus that had defined her career and saved her life in countless situations. And then you're going to do the same, because that's how we build not just better shooters, but a better force. The shot that followed a perfect hit at 1,000 meters in variable wind conditions wasn't just a demonstration of skill. It was a continuation of William Mitchell's legacy, a promise that excellence was achievable regardless of who said it was impossible. A reminder that sometimes the best sniper in any room might be the person everyone underestimated right up until the moment they pulled the trigger and proved everyone wrong.